The night sky was covered with stars, and the air was thick with smoke from the great fire in the center of the alien village. Strange voices rose together in song, deep and rhythmic, echoing through the rocky hills around them. The fire burned, brighter with every chant, throwing long shadows across the ground. Around the flames, dozens of alien villagers stood in a wide circle, their faces glowing red in the light, their eyes fixed on what stood near the fire. Small creatures, alien puppies, were tied close to the burning wood. Their tiny bodies shook as they cried softly, their eyes wide with fear. The sound was weak, but enough to make any heart tremble. Yet no one in the circle moved to help. To the villagers, this was not cruelty. To them, it was a tradition, something done for generations under the stars. At the edge of the crowd stood a human visitor. He had traveled far across the stars, curious about alien worlds, eager to learn their ways. But what he saw tonight was something he could not understand. His breath caught as he watched the fire rise higher. The heat brushed his face, and the puppies whimpered louder. Every instinct inside him screamed that this was wrong. The alien chief, tall and broad with shimmering skin, lifted his hand to silence the crowd. His voice carried easily over the fire. Tonight, he declared, the fire will cleanse. The puppies will return to the light. Their spirits will keep our world safe. The crowd cheered, raising their hands toward the sky. To them, this was a celebration. To the human, it was a nightmare. He looked at the faces around him. None of them seemed to doubt the act. None of them seemed to care for the cries of the small creatures. At the center, the human's fists clenched at his sides. He was only a guest here. He was told to respect their customs. But how could he respect something that filled his chest with such unease? His heart pounded, and sweat ran down his back as he took a step closer to the fire. The flames crackled and snapped, sparks flying upward into the dark. The heat grew sharper. The puppies shuffled, trying to move away, but the ropes held them firm. Their eyes searched the crowd as if hoping anyone would step forward. The human's eyes locked on them, and something inside him shifted. He remembered another time, far away on Earth, when he had seen a small dog trapped in danger. He had saved it then, without thinking, because it was the right thing to do. And now, across the stars, he felt the same pull, the same unshakable voice in his heart. But this was different. Here, he was alone. Here, he was surrounded by aliens who believed this act was sacred. If he interfered, they would see it as an insult, maybe even as a crime. He might never be welcome in this world again. He might even lose more than that. The chief raised his hand again. The fire is ready, he called out. Let the cleansing begin. The crowd erupted in another cheer. The flames jumped higher, and the human felt his stomach twist. Time was running out. If he stayed silent, if he kept his place in the shadows, the puppies would not live to see the dawn. His breath grew heavy, and he knew there was no choice left. He could not stand by, not now. Slowly, he stepped forward, out of the crowd, into the glow of the firelight. The aliens nearest to him turned their heads, surprised. Whispers spread quickly through the circle. A human stepping into the ritual was something no one had expected. He stood tall, though his heart raced inside his chest. His eyes met the chief's across the fire. The chanting grew quieter as one by one, the villagers fell silent, their attention fixed on the lone figure in the firelight. The chief frowned, his voice low but firm. Why do you step forward, human? This is not your place. The human did not answer at once. He felt the eyes of everyone upon him. He felt the weight of their judgment. But he also saw the puppies, their eyes reflecting the fire, their cries soft but desperate. That was all he needed. He took another step closer, the heat burning against his skin. His voice, when it came, was steady. This cannot happen, he said. Not while I am here. A wave of murmurs rolled through the crowd. Some aliens gasped. Others shook their heads. The chief's frown deepened. You would challenge our way. You would stand against us? The human's jaw tightened. He did not flinch. He did not step back. I cannot watch them suffer, he said simply. Not tonight, not ever. The silence was heavy. The fire snapped and hissed, filling the gap where words had fallen away. The villagers looked to their chief, waiting for his answer, their eyes wide with disbelief. The chief slowly lowered his hand, his gaze locked on the human. The firelight danced between them, the crackle of flames the only sound. The puppies whimpered once more, their cries carrying softly into the night, and the human stood firm, knowing the step he had taken could change everything. The circle around the fire remained still. After the human spoke, the words hung in the smoky air, too heavy for anyone to answer at once. The flames popped and hissed, and the glowing sparks floated up like restless stars. Every alien eye stayed locked on the human who now stood between the fire and the trembling puppies. For a long moment, no one moved. The chief's gaze was hard, his jaw set tight. But he did not raise his hand again. Instead, a low wave of whispers spread through the crowd. Some voices carried doubt, some anger, and some only confusion. The human could hear them but did not turn to look. His eyes stayed on the small creatures at the center, the ones whose lives balanced on the edge of the fire. Finally, one of the younger aliens stepped forward. He was tall and broad, his skin shining silver in the light. His steps were slow but heavy, the ground crunching under his feet. He stopped only a short distance from the human, his expression unreadable. "You do not belong here," he said quietly, though the words carried enough strength for all to hear. "This is not your world, not your way. Why do you speak against us?" The human's heart pounded, but he did not look away. He breathed deeply, steadying his voice. "Because wrong is still wrong, no matter whose world it is," he said. "They are helpless. They should not be near this fire." The crowd stirred at his words. Some gasped softly, others frowned, folding their arms. The younger alien's eyes narrowed. As though weighing every syllable, the chief finally spoke. Again, his tone was calm but carried the weight of authority. "Human, you misunderstand. The fire does not harm for no reason. The fire gives strength to our people. It is our tradition, our bond with the stars. You see fear where there is honor." The human shook his head. "I only see lives at risk. I cannot stand aside." The chief's voice grew firmer. "You would stand against us, against all who are gathered here." The human glanced around him, at the wide circle of faces, at the many eyes shining with light and judgment. He was only one among many, a guest in their world. Yet he felt a pull inside, stronger than his fear. He lifted his chin. "If I must stand alone, then I will." The younger alien stepped closer, so close now that the heat of the fire touched them both. For a moment, it seemed he might force the human back, but he stopped, searching the human's face. The silence stretched longer, broken only by the restless crackling of the flames and the soft whimpers of the puppies. Then something surprising happened. An older alien woman in the crowd spoke up. Her voice was soft, but it carried over the fire. "Why does he care more than we do? Look at him, he does not turn his eyes away." The villagers turned to her, surprised. No one answered her question, but the air around them shifted. Doubt flickered in some faces. A few eyes dropped to the ground, uneasy. The chief, however, remained firm. He raised his voice above them all. "Tradition is not a matter of care or not care. It is survival. Without it, we are lost." He turned back to the human. "You must step back. You must accept what is, or you cannot remain among us." The human felt the weight of choice pressing down on him. He could leave, turn his back, and stay safe, or he could stand firm and face whatever came. His heart gave him no room for doubt. He stepped closer to the fire, the heat pressing against him, and lifted his voice so all could hear. "If you wish to test your strength, test it on me, but do not test it on them." A wave of shock passed through the crowd. Murmurs rose higher, mixing with disbelief and curiosity. No outsider had ever spoken against their ways so boldly. The chief's eyes darkened, but he did not strike, nor did he signal the others. Instead, he studied the human, as though trying to understand what gave him such courage. The firelight glowed brighter, as if the flames themselves listened. The puppies cried once more, their small voices carrying into the silent night. The sound pierced the stillness, and even those who believed in the ritual could not completely ignore it. The human did not move from his place. His body trembled slightly, but his voice remained steady. "I will not leave. I will not turn away." Do what you must with me, but I will not let them face the fire." And so the circle stood in silence, the night holding its breath, the choice. Before the chief was no longer simple, and every eye waited for his next word. The flames crackled higher, and the story of that night was only beginning to unfold. The circle round the fire felt heavier than before, as if the very air carried the weight of the humans' words. The aliens did not chant now. They did not sing. They only watched, waiting for what would happen next. The human stood with the heat of the flames brushing against his skin, his eyes fixed on the trembling puppies. His heart knew the truth: he could not leave them there. The chief's gaze did not waver. "Your courage is loud," he said, his tone low and steady. "But courage without wisdom brings ruin. You are only one among many. Do not mistake your will for the will of a world." The human's voice was calm, though his chest rose with uneven breaths. "If the will of this world is to let them burn, then I will not follow it. I will follow what is right." A ripple of unease spread through the crowd. Some shifted on their feet, some crossed their arms tightly. A few turned their faces away from the sight of the puppies shivering near the fire. The silence grew longer, stretched by the sound of sparks snapping in the air. The human took one step forward. The glow of the fire wrapped around him, painting his face with red light. The ropes that bound the small creatures were only a few steps away. His heart thudded in his chest like a drumbeat, louder than the whispers of the crowd. The younger alien who had spoken before suddenly blocked his way. He was taller and stronger, his shadow rising like a wall between the human and the fire. His arms crossed as he leaned slightly forward. "Enough," he said firmly. "Do not take another step." The human looked up at him, his voice soft but steady. "I must." The younger alien's jaw tightened. His eyes searched the human's face, perhaps for hesitation, perhaps for fear. He found neither. Slowly, with a sound of frustration, he stepped back, though his gaze never softened. The human moved forward again. The crowd held their breath as the distance closed. The puppies lifted their heads, their soft cries sounding almost hopeful. The flames reached higher, sending out waves of heat that made the human's skin sting. But still he pressed on. Then, just as his hand reached for the first knot, another alien stepped forward, gripping his arm. The grasp was strong, meant to stop him without harm, but the pressure bit into his skin. The human froze for a moment, knowing he could pull back, knowing this was the last chance to walk away. But he did not move back. Instead, he turned his head slowly and met the alien's eyes. "I will not stop," he said quietly. The grip lingered, tight enough to hold him, yet the human's calm words carried more weight than any force. The alien hesitated, and in that hesitation, the human lowered his hand to the ropes. The crowd gasped softly as the first knot came loose. The puppies shuffled, their tiny legs pressing against the ground, their cries rising a little louder. The fire crackled angrily, as though it too knew its hold was slipping away. The second rope fell free. Sparks leapt upward into the sky, carried by the wind. The human's arm still ached where he had been held, but he did not pause. He worked with quick hands, determined to free them all. The chief's voice rose, sharp now, echoing over the circle. "Human, you do not understand the path you walk. This act will mark you forever. You cannot undo it once it is done." The human did not answer. His fingers pulled at the final knot, his breath steady despite the fire's heat and the stares that burned even stronger than the flames. At last, the ropes fell completely. The puppies stumbled forward, free at last, their small forms scattering away from the fire's reach. A sound spread through the crowd, part shock, part outrage, part wonder. The human stood tall, breathing hard, his body lit by the glow of the fire behind him. The puppies gathered at his feet, pressing close to the one figure who had chosen to protect them. For a moment, no one moved. The night seemed to pause, holding the scene in silence. Then the chief lifted his hand, his voice filled with weight. "You have broken what has stood for centuries. You have stolen from the fire. You have made yourself an enemy to our way." The words rippled through the villagers, louder than their whispers, heavier than their doubts. Yet the human did not falter. He placed himself firmly between the fire and the puppies, his shadow long in the firelight. He had risked more than his place among them. He had risked everything, and the night, alive with sparks and whispers, waited for what would follow. The crowd broke into restless whispers as the human stood in the firelight. With the freed puppies huddled at his feet, no chant rose, no song. Followed only the sound of voices mixing with the crackle of flames. The chief's eyes narrowed, and his hand remained lifted in the air, holding the gathering in uneasy silence. The human looked around him. He knew he had crossed a line that could never be undone. The stares of the villagers pressed against him, some filled with anger, some with confusion, and a few with something harder to name, perhaps doubt. The puppies trembled against his legs, their small bodies pressed close, their cries soft but insistent. They trusted him now, and that trust carried more weight than the fire, the crowd, or even the chief's command. At last, the chief lowered his hand. His voice came deep and steady, echoing over the circle. "You have chosen against us, then. Take what you saved and leave. But know this, our eyes will not look kindly on you again." The human's breath caught. The words gave him no comfort. He knew leaving would not be as simple as stepping away. Even now, the younger warriors shifted restlessly, their bodies tense, their eyes following him with suspicion. He bent low and scooped the smallest of the puppies into his arms. The others pressed close, padding beside him as he began to step. Back from the circle, the villagers parted slowly, forming a narrow path. Some hissed softly under their breath, others shook their heads, and a few turned away entirely. As if they could not bear to watch, the human walked with steady steps, though his heart beat fast. The fire's heat faded as he moved further into the cool night air, but the weight of 100 eyes stayed fixed on his back. When he reached the edge of the circle, he turned once to glance behind him. The chief stood unmoving, his tall figure outlined by the blaze. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and in that silent exchange, the human understood. This was not finished. The fire might have been left behind, but the memory of his defiance would follow. He did not linger, turning away. He guided the puppies into the darkness beyond the village lights. Their small paws shuffled over the dry earth, and their soft whines carried into the night. He whispered low words of comfort, though he doubted they understood. Perhaps the tone alone was enough, for they stayed close to him, as though his presence gave them safety. The night air was cool and carried the scent of distant trees. The stars stretched wide overhead, brighter away from the fire's glow. For a brief moment, there was quiet, a fragile stillness, as though the world itself held its breath. But that stillness did not last. Behind him came the sound of movement. It was faint at first, then clearer, the shuffle of many feet leaving the village, the low calls of voices, the snap of branches underweight. He did not turn back to look. He already knew. They were following. The puppies seemed to sense it, too. Their ears perked, and they pressed closer, their soft bodies brushing against his legs. He quickened his pace, leading them toward the cover of the nearby forest. The tall trees rose like pillars against the starlight, their shadows deep and endless. He entered without hesitation, letting the night swallow them whole. The forest was alive with quiet sounds, the rustle of leaves, the whisper of wind, the distant call of unseen creatures. Each step forward carried him further from the open firelight, deeper into a place of shadow and mystery. The ground was uneven, scattered with roots and rocks, but he pressed on, guiding the puppies with gentle words and gestures. Yet the sounds behind him did not fade. The villagers were coming, their torches casting moving lights among the trees. The glow flickered through the branches, growing closer. Their voices rose and fell, searching, calling, moving steadily after him. The human's breath grew heavier. He could not run too fast. The puppies were small, their legs short, their steps uneven. They stumbled often, and each time he slowed to help them. To leave them behind was unthinkable. To keep them with him meant danger pressed closer with every moment. At last, he found a narrow gap between two large rocks. Beyond it stretched the mouth of a cave, dark and still, hidden under the hanging roots of an old tree. Without hesitation, he guided the puppies inside. The cool air of the cave wrapped around them, damp and heavy, shutting out the noise of the forest. For a brief instant, the human crouched low, holding the smallest creature close while the others huddled near his feet. He listened. Outside, the voices of the villagers grew louder, their torches moving in restless circles through the trees. They searched the forest floor, their shadows shifting across the rocks. The glow of their lights flickered near the cave's entrance. He held his breath. The puppies pressed closer, silent now, as though they, too, understood the need for stillness. Then, from the depth of the cave, came a sound, a slow movement, soft but certain, echoing against the stone walls. The human turned his head sharply, his eyes straining in the dark. The villagers were outside, their torches only a few steps away. But inside the cave something else was waiting. The human tightened his hold on the small creature in his arms, his heart caught between the danger outside and the unknown within. The night was no longer silent. It was alive with choice and consequence, and he knew that the story of his courage had only just begun. The camp was no longer silent at night. The alien puppies, once frightened and trembling, now moved freely around the fire pit, playing, barking softly in their strange way, and chasing each other through the shadows. The human sat nearby, his arms resting on his knees, eyes watching their every movement with quiet care. He could not sleep, not when the night carried the memory of smoke and the roar of fire. That had almost taken them away. But the danger was not gone. Everyone knew it. The flames had been stopped once. But whispers spread through the nearby alien settlement. The fire would rise again, stronger, hungrier, and this time nothing could hold it back. The people looked at the puppies with troubled eyes. Some said the young creatures were cursed, that their presence had drawn the danger in the first place. Others feared their cries and sparks of strange energy that sometimes flickered around their fur. The human heard these whispers, but he never turned away. Instead, he moved closer to the puppies each day, teaching them to trust, to follow his hand, to stay by his side when the ground shook or when the sky glowed red with warning. The little creatures began to look at him differently too, not as a stranger, but as something safe, something strong. They huddled against him at night, tiny bodies pressed together, eyes glowing like small stars in the dark or still. The unease in the settlement grew. One evening, when the sun was sinking behind the hills, a group of elders came to the human. Their steps were heavy, their eyes lined with worry. They stood before him, their shadows stretching across the firelight. "You stopped the fire once," one of them said slowly, his voice heavy with doubt. "But no one can stop what is coming next. The land is dry, the winds are cruel, and the sparks in the air are not natural. The puppies, they may not survive another storm." The human listened, his jaw tight. He felt the warmth of the puppies against his legs, heard their quiet whimpers, and he shook his head. "They will survive," he said firmly. His voice carried more strength than he felt inside. But he could not let them hear the trembling in his heart. The elders exchanged uneasy glances. One of them leaned closer. "If you truly believe that, then you must prove it. Take them beyond the settlement, away from the flames. Show us that courage is not only words." That night, the human sat alone by the fire, thinking. The puppies curled against him, unaware of the weight pressing on his mind. To take them away meant to step into the unknown, into forests he had never walked, into lands where no map guided the way. But staying meant waiting for the fire to return, stronger and closer. He closed his eyes, listening to the soft breaths of the little creatures. He thought of the first time he had seen them, trapped and helpless, and how something inside him had refused to let them fall. That same force stirred in him again, stronger than fear. He knew what he had to do. Before dawn, he rose quietly, lifting one puppy into his arms while the others followed. The night was cool, the sky filled with dim stars, and the horizon glowed faintly with the warning of red. The human took a step forward, then another, his boots crunching softly on the dry earth. The puppies stayed close, their small paws pattering behind him. He did not look back at the settlement, not even once. Ahead of him lay the unknown, but in that unknown, he carried something no fire could touch: his promise. A promise that no matter what waited beyond the hills, he would not let them be lost. And somewhere in the distance, as if the land itself was listening, a low rumble stirred, faint but growing. The fire had not forgotten. It was waiting. The Night sky above the alien village was calm, sprinkled with countless bright stars. Yet a strange silence covered the land. The fire that had once threatened everything was now nothing more than smoke in the distance, fading like a memory. But for the human and the alien puppies, the journey was far from over. Everyone could feel that something deeper, something unseen, was still waiting. The puppies huddled close to him, their small eyes glowing softly in the starlight. They trusted him completely now. Wherever he walked, they followed. And though he had saved them from fire, he knew the real challenge was only beginning. The villagers gathered quietly around him, some whispering, some simply watching. Their faces carried both relief and worry, as if they were grateful yet afraid of what might come next. The elder of the village stepped forward, his long cloak trailing behind him. His voice was low but heavy with meaning. He told the human that saving the puppies was more than an act of kindness, it was a signal. The fire was not natural. It was a test, a trial sent by the unseen forces that guarded this world. And by passing it, the human had been chosen for something far greater. The human listened silently, feeling the weight of every word. He hadn't come here to be chosen. He hadn't come to carry destinies or face trials. He had simply acted because it felt right. Yet now, as the elder spoke, the puppies pressed closer to him, as if they already knew the truth. Their future and his were tied together. A sudden tremor ran through the ground. The villagers gasped, clutching each other. The earth pulsed like a giant heartbeat beneath their feet. The puppies whimpered softly, looking at the human with wide, trusting eyes. The elder raised his staff, pointing toward the horizon where the mountains touched the sky. He said the fire was only the beginning. Something vast was awakening there, something that had been sleeping for ages. And now it stirred, because the puppies had survived when they were not meant to. The human's chest tightened, but he stood firm. Fear tried to creep in, but the soft brush of a puppy's nose against his hand gave him strength. He realized in that moment that courage wasn't about fighting. It was about standing when others couldn't, about protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. The villagers began to chant softly, their voices rising like a song carried by the night wind. It wasn't a song of fear, it was a song of hope. They believed now that the human was not just a stranger. He was their light in the darkness, their protector in the storm to come. As the chant grew louder, the sky itself seemed to respond. A streak of light crossed the heavens, glowing brighter than any star. The puppies lifted their heads, eyes following the light with wonder. The human knew it wasn't random. It was a sign. Something was calling them forward, to a place where destiny waited. He looked at the puppies, then at the villagers. He had a choice: stay in safety or walk into the unknown. But when one of the puppies placed its small paw on his boot, trembling yet trusting, the choice became clear. The human lifted his gaze to the mountains. He whispered to himself, barely audible, that he would see this through, not because he was chosen, but because he refused to let innocence be lost. The night was quiet again, but beneath that quiet was a promise. Tomorrow they would begin a journey no one had ever dared to take, and whatever waited ahead, the human would face it not alone, but with the puppies at his side, carrying courage stronger than fire itself.